Hi everyone, welcome to another episode on season 3 of the Part of the Pros podcast. For any new listeners just joining us, this is a podcast series where I sit down with some of the most talented and successful execs in sports and entertainment, learning about their journey so far, the path to success in sports business, as well as career-related industry topics as well. Today, I'm sat with Neda Tabatabaie. I think I've got that right. Tell me if I didn't. The SVP of Business Analytics and Technology at the San Jose Sharks, and quite honestly, a true leader in the world of business intelligence. Someone who always comes to mind when I think of the best when it comes to BI and tech. Neda, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Neda, question I love to get these things kicked off with. Take us back to the start, take us back to the early days. How did you first get into sports? How did you first get into the industry?
So that's a long story. I'm going to take you back even before that. I was born in Iran. I immigrated to Canada, to Toronto. Toronto is home when I was about 21. And once I started, my new life, I guess, there, I studied economics at the University of Toronto, and then at the same time was working part-time in a retailer in Toronto. After I graduated and through some networking that I have done and volunteer work that I have done, I got a job in that retailer's what was at the time called database marketing department. Actually, it was before that, it was called direct marketing. We used to send emails, and now we send emails, we used to send mailers to people's houses. And the job of the role was to make sure that we are targeting the right people for the right offer, and also understanding the opportunities to upsell people from, let's say, cosmetics to accessories to, maybe higher end fashion. That's where my role really in North America in the data and database marketing world started. In addition to just some of the marketing work, we of course looked into even the blend of merchandise across Canada. What size are people wearing, what, concentration of merchandise to purchase. From there, I was there for maybe about 2 years, and I really fell in love with the analytics portion of it. Left the organization, went to another organization that their focus was just analytics. Great organization. The immediate team that I worked with was we were not meshing at all. It was not a happy environment for me. So I left learning that team environment and team culture is a huge part of what I'm looking for, which is something I had in the retailer. And as I was looking for a job at the time, Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, which are the owners and operators of Toronto Maple Leaf, Toronto Raptors, Toronto FC, several arenas, and at this point, even restaurants and retailers, at the time they didn't have that. They were looking for a role called a CRM coordinator. This is 2005, and maybe 2 or 3 teams had a CRM system in North American sports, frankly. So they were looking for a CRM coordinator. And I applied for the job, and one of the things they were looking for was somebody who has worked with data, but also can work with people, which sort of falls in the sort of my sweet spot. I never thought once I applied for the job that I would even get an interview. It's a very popular organization. Everybody wants to work there, and I did not have any connections. So thankfully, my resume, I guess, stood out, and I had a couple of interviews with the HR and then with person who's now the CMO there, Shannon Hosford, and very quickly moved on and got the job. It was sort of the right fit for both of us. I was looking for a great culture, great environment, opportunity to grow and learn. And they were looking for somebody like me who can come in, knows a little bit, is open to learning, and just bring everybody along with them. So that was a CRM coordinator job, which was, I think, maybe 4 or 5 different teams at the time had that role again in North America. So it was very new, and it was sort of not accepted in the sports industry. It was like, what do you mean data? What is that going to do for us, right? So clearly we have come a long way since then. And now you see people like myself in almost every sports organization, agencies, partners looking after the data and technology of the organization.
There's a lot of things to unpack there. So it's an incredible journey that I'm sure we can sit here and spend hours talking about. One thing that really stands out to me when I think about that transition is, I guess, growing up in Iran, I have a few Iranian friends. At least with the friends that I have, none of them are into American sports. So I guess that kind of transition of coming over to the US, getting an initial flavor of MLSE, who, by the way, one of the early adopters of data in sports, one of the early adopters of technology in sports, and now, by far quite leading the way when it comes to data and technology in the industry. When a business like that comes knocking, that must have been quite a surreal moment. I think you said you wasn't expecting to get an interview, right? So to actually land the job,
Yeah.
come a long way from, you know, a young girl in Iran and moving over to the US and breaking into one of the very first early adopters of a market that you're, you know, wanting to pursue a career in.
Yes, it's true. I mean, I always loved the NBA when I lived in Iran, and of course, soccer was the #1 sports, right? But as soon as I moved to Canada, I can tell you exactly when I fell in love with hockey. Like, I moved August of 97, January or February 98 was the Winter Olympics. And it was the first time NHL players were playing in the Winter Olympics. I think it was in Nagano. And within the first game I watched, I was like, what is this? So fast. And of course, being in Toronto, the culture of hockey is something else, right? This is Toronto Maple Leafs was at one of their strongest points in the history. And also, as a new immigrant to a country, it was a point of connection for me to the people that I necessarily didn't have a connection with, right? You know, I was older from most of my classmates at the university, not by a lot, but still, you know, by a few years. I was working and going to school. And I've talked about that before. And I think, you know, because we have this hockey's for everyone, you know, motto that we use. And it became something that I could connect with people because when they went to the playoffs, everybody, regardless of who you were, you know, we were watching the hockey game. So, and then the same with the Raptors, you know, they were, you know, Vince Carter made most of Canada fall in love with with basketball. So it was, but getting a job in the organization was definitely not something I could do. I didn't have the right connections or the right network. I wasn't in the sports industry, right? Because most people at the time, you were not coming to the sports industry from the outside, right? They were mostly people that had, you know, you were becoming an intern for something and then you know, grew in the industry, that has changed now. We're getting a set of diverse background, education, you know, skills, everything from the industry joining the sports industry, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that they certainly, MLSE this is, would certainly have an advantage for having an eye to pick up talent like that at such an early stage and getting some of that talent that's, you know, young, up and coming. You know, we'll come on to where you're at the moment and the initiatives that you're driving in today's world. But I'm sure there's a lot that you would have picked up in that, 8.5 years joining as a coordinator, working your way up to director level, and taking on board digital as well. You know, that really, unless I'm mistaken, then Neda, probably would have set your initial footsteps and pathway into the industry that's really helped shape the person and the professional that you are today.
100%. And one of the things I always talk about again is, in addition to my direct boss, the COO of, at the time, the CEO of MLSE, Tom Anselmi, and the president, Richard Petty, was just so embracing of this new person that had started, right? I got the tools that I needed. They knew there is something there. They maybe didn't have the proof yet, but they were smart enough to know, you know, what's going on. And they saw sort of, they do experiment and still do. And we do that here too, of, is this going to work? And then when you're a person that is performing well, then you get more opportunities. And I got a bigger portfolio every year. Most, you know, just, you know, I went from just a CRM coordinator, we started analytics. I got a couple of people working with me, got the research portfolio. And then we did, with my counterparts on the marketing department, we did a lot of research and sort of shaping where we want the marketing, the messaging, and frankly, focus areas of the organization and the teams go. So it was just that environment of being embraced and giving the tools, which frankly, not every time it's somebody at the most junior person in the organization gets. That definitely set me up for success. And then that culture of continuous learning, right? That is still, I mean, I had it. It was definitely developed further there. And here it's still something that, you know, what are you reading? What are you learning now? What's going on? You know, poke your head outside of your, you know, little square and then see everything else is definitely a big part of that.
And so 8.5 years, MLSE, core software, probably known now today, at least, as one of the leading sports software platforms in the industry, across the market, across the country. How did that come about? First, you know, step into a VP level role, much more kind of responsibility, level of seniority. That must have been quite a big move for you.
It wasn't, you know, it wasn't because I was working with Core at that point for 5-6 years, probably already knew each other really well. I had seen them develop. They knew me well. it was time for me to move and look for the next, adventure. For me personally, I wanted something now different. And they were looking for me, and a couple of other people got hired around the same time to take the software company to more of a sports industry, adding a consulting side, understanding now you have the software, what do you do with it, right? So it was sort of a right fit. We talked informally for a little bit, and then I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to make the next step. So yeah, going there, it was very interesting because I went from having my own teams and working within, these are my Leafs, these are my Raptors, and so on, to working with many different teams. And I was lucky because we had a great roster of clients there. And also the challenge of going from sort of a custom-made software to software as a service, the services that goes with that, the expectation of a customer, so that was the right move at the right time for me. Just a very different being on the other side of the table, right? Now you're selling your services. I was always the person, and still to this day, I'm the person who's buying the services or the software.
That was going to be my question. A lot of people make that transition into a vendor or an agency, partly because they want to do something a little different, but sometimes it actually gives them a very different perspective of the industry, right? Seeing it from a vendor's perspective and understanding the real challenges that businesses face. And you're looking outside of just the MLSE organization here, right? You're looking across the industry. Do you think that perspective really kind of helped to maybe upskill yourself in certain areas, maybe some areas that you already knew a little about, but that really kind of helped you to understand? Because I think we'll come on to the whole topic around today's subject, which is also around kind of BI and sports. But I think having different perspectives of different points of views, different opinions on how best practice should be conducted when it comes to that can be really, really important, right?
Yeah, it is important. I would say it definitely even actually perhaps sort of my expectations a little bit higher. Like when you go into, if you're coming with as a technology partner to coming to a team or whomever it is, do your research, do your work, right? And go in there with a little bit of more knowledge than just the random, sales pitches we sometimes get. And also the service level, right? For me, the reason I hire third parties to make my life easier, make my team's life easier. If you have to manage them, then, in a sort of maybe very almost micromanager level, that's not a relationship that's going to last. I work with people who get it and run with it. And if it's and solve my problems, like some of them I call like my second brain, right? They help and support us because we are a lean team, small team with a lot of expectations. So those are the things that really work. And I also had that experience of, they are going into rooms with a couple of the teams that I work with, and I still have maintained really great relationships with them. It was the perception of this software company, perhaps I was able to change in several places, but also learning from culture of those companies. A couple of them, I will call out San Antonio Spurs, for example. Absolutely fantastic, right? The day after the championship parade, we were there installing a new system, right? Like, who does that? And then the expectation, how they have prepped their workforce that there is this new system coming, how they adopted, the leadership team, everyone, absolutely brilliant. So that's the part I take probably more than the technology relationship, is the people, the cultural part of the change making is a huge part of it.
Interesting. And back to the team side, San Jose Sharks come knocking this time. And you've been there for what, 9 years, right? So this taking you back a few years now, but talk to us about that. That must have been, you mentioned earlier, hockey was a big thing for you when you first moved over to Canada, and something that enabled you to embed yourself into the local community. Talk to us about that kind of, next big move into another major sports team.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily looking to move at the time. I was living in New York, loved it. When I started looking at the role was as if it was written for me, and I hit all the boxes. Then I sort of, I was like, okay, maybe this is more interesting than I thought. And I started looking at the organization, again, the culture, big part of what I was looking for, talked to a lot of people in the hockey world that I knew. And then I thought to myself, it's a risk that is worth taking, because where else am I going to go? In Silicon Valley, with the ownership that exists, at the time, there was nothing in terms of the BI and analytics. And can I do what I did before in 5 years now, maybe in a year and, in a year and a half? And then the impact on the business, I thought, and my perspective always is, hey, if it doesn't go, you always go back, right? I can always go back to Toronto and find another job, right? It was just it was risky, but at the same time, it just had a lot of aspect of it that made me really interested in what I can do. So yeah, so I moved here. I'm going into my 9th season, so in 2015, and it was absolutely one of the best decisions I've made in many, many ways. And honestly, 9 years doesn't seem like 9 years, because it has been continuous growth, change, learning, challenges. Sometimes it feels like it was 2 years ago, honestly.
So you joined as the VP of BI, right?
Yeah.
Did you come on board had they already had a business intelligence or analytics or technology platform in place, or do you come on board to build that out?
There was nothing. So I came in, the first thing I did was bring a CRM system, brought a CRM system. From there, we sort of started building the underlying infrastructure, added like a marketing automation. Ironically, this industry, everybody works together. We hired core, to do some of our other work that we needed. So the analytics, it started very much focusing on ticketing, because that's the biggest need, and also sometimes you can say the most established part of what you're looking for. So we started from there, and then we started adding to it. That system we had then has evolved, and parts of it are still the same, parts of it has evolved and completely changed. We now have a massive data warehouse, new analytics tools, and more is added to it every day. And then around 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago now, I also, the IT department started reporting to me. So that changed my perspective, which I can talk about a little bit more about the use of data and technology at the organization.
Perfect. It's just interesting how, when you kind of look back, I speak to a lot of people, right, sat in your shoes, similar roles, sometimes in similar skill sets, sometimes not. And I always find those very first roles really interesting, because for a number of reasons, it shows a good intent from a business. We're seriously willing to invest in this, right? We see a need for this. To your point, they were maybe MLSE had started this maybe a decade beforehand, right? So there's obviously reason to make that happen. To recognize that opportunity, it sat in your shoes and see that there's opportunity to scale this business. But then actually now looking back 9 years later to say, hey, we've actually done a pretty good job at it, right? We've scaled it. You've now taken on board technology, something to obviously be super proud of. I guess thinking about the idea of accomplishments, achievements, looking back at your career, Neda, what would you say maybe the 1 or 2 things that really kind of stand out for you as biggest achievements, biggest accomplishments that you would say really stand out the most?
It actually has probably nothing to do with data analytics and technology, the other stuff, right?
That's fine.
But the data analytics and technology enabled me to be there, right? So we have hosted, and that's definitely the highlight of my career. We hosted the All-Star here a few years ago. And as part of the All-Star, there was a bunch of, events and fan fest and everything happening. I got to be on a panel with Willie O'Ree. Hockey fans know who Willie O'Ree is. He's a legend. He's the first Black player who played in the NHL. And when I got that note, I was not joking, running around and, dropping some, choice words. And I just could not believe myself, because it's such a pivotal moment in who am I to be in the panel with this person, right? But that was definitely one of the highlights of my career, and a few other things too. We started this initiative here called Women of Teal to bring more female fans to the Sharks games. And, it's something we already had a very strong female fan base, but we felt like there were still things that the female fan base is not necessarily talked to properly. This is 7-8 years ago. Now everybody's seeing the power of women sports fans. And that by itself, I think once we started it, the first year was small. The second year, we had some fantastic women dropping the puck at the center of the ice. And now that has become its own initiative that has merchandise associated with it. So I think sometimes for me, what is more impactful and why I appreciate being here is what my job enables me to do, that is my passion, right? I love data analytics technology, totally geek out about it. But it's also sometimes you do things that you can impact the bigger, not only the industry, but the community around you.
Yeah.
Those tend to be my highlights of my career.
It's those
Yeah.
pinch me moments, isn't it? It's those,
Yeah.
you kind of look around and you're like, this is crazy. I'm involved in this. I mean, look, I've not been in any sort of similar kind of position. I've never worked team side, and even in the seat that I'm sat in, I just support teams in finding good talent, right? And even that, for me, sometimes playing a part in something, you know, when you're working with a team that's really growing something special, when you can say that you played a genuine part in it. I mean, even for me, that's a bit of a pinch me moment. So I can only imagine being there for the All-Star final and having all these amazing faces and names around you, and people that you probably never would categorize yourself as being in the same conversation,
Nope.
let alone in the same room. So that's great. Love to hear that. So look, the topic I'd love to dive into today is business intelligence within sports. So as we've already alluded to a number of times, this is an area that has grown exponentially over the past decade and beyond. I guess let's start very simply, because I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast, some of them are, tech savvy, they're BI savvy, some of them are, commercial people, some of them partnerships people. So we have some graduates, people that are going through the process to get into the industry. We'll start very high level. I guess, in your opinion, why do you think business intelligence is crucial for a sports organization, whether that be the San Jose Sharks, whether that be any sports team?
So really, it's about the data, right? We are a business like every other business, and we're going to focus on the business side of it today, right? It's the proper use of data, and proper being the key word, can help you make better business decisions, right? And I also a firm believer that data is a tool. How you use it and how an organization uses it is definitely it's like the art and the science part of it, right? You need to use that tool to make the right business decision based on all the other things that right? Like we always have to, for me, I always say you have to keep the fan in mind. You have to put the, that hat in your head once you're making that decision. Also, there's part of the business, part of what my team does, because there's a business intelligence side and the IT technology side. We also enable the users internally to use data better, right? So if you're a finance person, if you're an HR person, if you're an operations person, do you have the right data to make the right decisions at the right time, right? So it's not only, the fan data is a huge part of what we work with. Most business intelligence team work with that, but the other internal business data is also part of that. And hopefully you can bring those two together. So the other part of it is that our industry was sort of a little bit more old school. And when I started, even up to a few years ago, we were behind in terms of many different aspects of how data was used in the sports industry. When I was in retail, as an example, we're doing a lot of cross-shopping analysis. We're using a lot of sort of understanding of how, if a customer is likely to come back, what are they supposed to purchase? Can we move them from this brand to that brand, increase spend, all of that. In the sports industry, in the past few years, we're catching up on that. Add to that, there is a lot of new data sources. When I started in 2005, in 2006, I went to a conference, and I recall specifically there was an NFL team that had just started accepting credit cards, right? We went from people lining up outside or maybe getting their season tickets mailed to them, to more online ticket sales. Then online retail got added. Then digital ticketing got added. Then we have now mobile apps on our iPhones. That is a source of data by itself. Social media. Just think about everything, like as a consumer, that has been added around you. Those are all data sources. And then the other aspect of sports industry, which is sort of interesting and sometimes frustrating and challenging, is that these are not all one ecosystem, and you don't typically control most of it, right? They are specific partners or specific vendor in one area that you have to go hire them. And then there is all these other sources still, right? Like, for example, if you go buy a ticket, you're buying a ticket from a website, you're buying a ticket from the Sharks, but that website, I don't own that website, right? Or that online retail aspect. And then if you go buy a merch online, that's a completely different vendor. If you come to our parking, there's probably 3 different technology pieces there. Ticketing, scanning at the door, there's another piece of technology, right? So there are all these data points that is all over the place, and each of them tell one story, but when you bring them together, it's another powerful story. Consumer expectations also have changed, and it's I guess elevated in a sense. People, there's a lot of competition out there. I can sit at home and watch something on TV or come to a game, right? So the fan experience and the customer experience of that is also a huge aspect of it. You have to make people's lives a little bit easier. If you're coming here for the first time, where are you going, where are you parking, all of that. Versus somebody who's been here for 30 years and maybe understanding what their food and beverage, like what are their preferences are. So those are all, again, it helps us make better business decisions. A couple of examples, maybe even how you staff the arena based on fan attendance is a huge part of what data is used, right? If you understand how many people are likely to be at the game on Saturday versus the game on Thursday, you staff proper differently. You probably staff your parking lot and entrances based on how you see the customer flow, right? And one of the projects that we did, this is a few years ago, and I like it because it's simple, and data doesn't need to be complicated. It's again about the insight you get out of it. Simple example, we started looking at our season ticket holders and where they live. If you're a season ticket holder with a lot of tenure, we have season ticket holders that have been with us for 30 plus years, which we're extremely lucky to have them still. They live closer to San Jose area, right? So most of our activation and everything have been in this area, South Bay mostly focused. When you start looking at newer season ticket holders, so people have been with us 1 to 5 years, you see a geographic move. You see East San Jose, you see going south towards Gilroy. And a few years ago, we didn't have video coverage, audio, like in terms of radio station coverage in that area. And then when we do activation, let's say there's a party happening or a viewing event, we didn't used to go there. We used to just have it in the San Jose South Bay area. So you're potentially missing meeting the fans when they are. So not as a result of that, but combined with the fact that we saw these trends happening and some of the other things, we no longer have a terrestrial radio. Our radio is on our app, which means you can get it anywhere, right? There was several other business decisions, but this was a part of that. We couldn't send radio signals down there. And also now that we have viewing parties, we maybe hold one in Gilroy. And we probably very likely soon going to have an ice facility in Gilroy, like in front of City Hall getting approved. So those are, again, simple, but you solve a problem. You try to understand what's going on. That's how you use data.
Okay. Very, very helpful. A lot of things to unpack there. There's a few questions off the back. So from my understanding, I want to try and get this across in the simplest form possible. The role of business intelligence within an organization almost acts as a supporter to all of the other departments, right? So you help each different line of business and each division in making more informed, better decisions. When it comes to things like prioritization, when it comes to managing a hectic work schedule, right? Because I can imagine all the CFO, the chief partnerships officer, the chief marketing officer, they're all saying, hey, Neda, we want to make some better decisions here, right? Help us to drive this marketing initiative or cut costs in these areas. How do you navigate some of those kind of complexities that come with it? Because as we've said, right, and you mentioned this a few times throughout this, the idea of buying a season ticket online to most people today is very, very normal, right? But 20 years ago, and maybe even in some instances less than that time frame, people were queuing up to get tickets at the door. People were queuing up to try and get food and beverage at halftime or during breaks. So when you kind of look at how much that area has developed over the past 20 years, and you then take into account all these different people that are trying to benefit from it, that must create some internal challenges and hurdles to try and navigate around them. So how do you really get around some of those issues in the best possible way that still drives the business to make efficient decisions?
Yeah, it is always a challenge, and it's actually a good challenge because that shows interest in what the department's trying to do, right? So we, and I've joked about this with my boss, I'm like, I have projects for the next 10 years at least, right? So a big part of it is the internal collaboration, and that goes across my department, right? Business analytics and technology, we call ourselves the BAT team. Our job is to make sure everyone else can do their job better, faster, have the right data or the technology to make the right decisions, less pain points, improving employee experience is actually part of our objectives. So there is a lot, and you can do so much work for every day and hire 20 more people and, still more work to do. So what we focus on every year, we have an organizational objective, 4 or 5 key things and key KPIs, maybe like 10 key KPIs and maybe 4 to 5 organizational objectives. And then we look at how this project rolls up to those objectives, and what is the impact of it, right? So for some of my projects, we actually created a scorecard that is, okay, if you want to buy X or implement a new system or, add a new source, how does this rank? Because I need to work not only with the ticketing department, partnership department, operation, marketing, right? For each department, their objective is the number one, right? Across the organization, maybe not so much. So we try to do our best to sort of rank the objectives, rank the projects based on the organizational objectives and the impact it's going to have, and then go from there. There's still, collaboration and communication is a huge part of it, because there are also sometimes external factors. Like there's sometimes our partners want something, right? What does that mean in terms of like the bigger scale, right? So it is, it's not a sort of a very binary situation. You have to continuously communicate and have those open lines of communication, and collaboration is really important, because sometimes when you have that honest discussion, or we have quarterly reviews of all of our projects that is coming up with my peers and a few other people, sometimes somebody's like, yeah, actually, let's not do mine. Let's focus on the other thing, right? That visibility and clear communication is a huge part of that.
For sure.
Yeah.
So
but then there's things that we're like, sorry, it's like season ticket holder renewals are coming. Everybody's focusing on that, right? So sometimes it's like everyone is in something. Sometimes you just sprinkle around a little bit.
Everyone's working on the same project, and then depending on the time of year, there are different projects and different divisions. Makes sense. Data, which I've come to find, especially the last couple of years, is pretty much everywhere, right? It comes in the form of people walking into the building. It comes in the form of when people purchase drinks, food. It comes in the form of when people are most likely to purchase a GA ticket. What types of data would you say are the most valuable to a sports team from a business perspective?
So you always start with the ticketing data. In North America, the ticketing data is gold. That's where you sort of, especially with digital ticketing, you sort of understand that first point of purchase and who's really doing that. Of course, then there's the attendance aspect of it, is, who purchased the ticket versus who attended the game is always different. But that's the fundamental, that almost like table stakes. You have to have it at this point. Then depending on your organization and where you are as a business, you might try to add to that. For us, for example, marketing data is a huge part of it, how our season ticket holders or other stakeholders, interact with us, what their preferred communication channels are. This data that is in CRM, which really is the indication of the relationship that our reps have with our season ticket holders, right? Are they in constant communication? What is the sentiment? That is hugely important for us. One of my counterparts here, we have a customer experience department. Her role and their role is to sort of just create that journey, but also understand the pain points of a season ticket holder or any fan coming through. So if you're coming at an event here, the survey data is a huge part of what we try to act based on, right? It might be because something might be wrong with one of the concession stand, or entrance into the building was cumbersome. So sometimes we do A/B testing on those things, and then we'll add to that. For us, e-commerce, our e-commerce is a huge point of data. Also, we, in terms of customer experience, the parking actually is a huge part of that. And if you look at my team and other teams, even in the Bay Area, it might be very different data sets that is important for you, right? Like the 49ers, for example, they might not necessarily be interested in certain things that I am interested in, like IG ticket sales. The volume of, I guess the portion of the IG ticket sales for them is maybe less of an impact on the business versus mine, right? So every business is different. ideally, you get to a point that you can combine all of these things and really see that customer in totality. But that also has its challenges because, again, all these data points are very different. But one of the things, the other challenge is the noise, right? There is so much data.
Yeah.
You can implement and integrate and implement and integrate and never get anywhere. One of the things we look for all the time from the first project we did was, what is this that I'm doing? Let's realize some value from it. Next, move to the next one. So what is the value of it and is it actionable? There is a lot of data that is not necessarily actionable at that time. So we focused on, even if you have one data point, is it actionable? What can we get out of it? Let's add to it and move on. Otherwise, you just be in this continuous implementation mode without any sort of value to show.
Spoke about challenges a lot there, and I think that's, I mean, businesses face challenges left, right, and center, right? But I think especially when it comes to adapting to something new, adopting something new first, then adapting to the constant changes that come around that. Neda, you may not know this about me, but I started off my first office job was as a data analyst. I say data analyst because that was my official job title. It was really just a data entry job. And I worked for a large consulting business. And my job was to ensure that the sales team utilized the CRM platform and updated and uploaded all the data in the correct way. And the one thing I learned from my year or so that I was there is data is only as good as the quality behind it, right? The quality that's put into it. When it comes to facing some of those internal battles and those internal challenges, have you guys managed to put in place certain kind of systems, processes whereby these errors or the quality of data, it's almost difficult for the data to be poor? Or is it, do you still kind of come across some, manual errors and some data quality issues that you face as a business?
100% you get run into issues. Like when a person is involved, there can always be potential for issues, right?
Right.
And we do set up processes. We were, from the day one that I started, we actually had very high level of CRM adoption because our CRO at the time was like on people's cases, right? But you can force things on people, or in my opinion, show value of it, right? So if you're a salesperson, all you care about is coming and making a sale, right? Probably your fresh job out of your school, probably a little bit of struggle trying to figure everything out. So if you put this, my job is to be like, okay, if you put this data in, here's how it can help you in a month, right? Or the last salesperson that left because they had such great data, these are the things you can do. We set up processes. We do have a lot of things established, but as change happens, you also have to revisit those. A couple of years ago, we had, maybe even it was last year, we had a whole new, most of like our VP of ticket sales and two of our directors in that department were new, right? So maybe a little bit later than we should have, we started talking about, because we were like, okay, these are the things you have, go for it, right? And my team had also changed at that point. So what we do now is, okay, what are you trying to do? Let's discuss the objective. And a lot of times things fall down in the process. We had this discussion yesterday and we have a meeting coming about it, is what are you trying to get, right? What are you trying to achieve? And don't think about the technology part of it. That's my job. And then, okay, let's discuss the process. A lot of the time, the process is the issue, right? And then it creates bad data or data that is not answering what they were looking for. Like if you're looking from the start of a customer journey to the end, what are the steps you need to take there to make sure you have the quality of data to go there? Showing value for most people would work, because sometimes also there are people who are scared, they don't know what they're doing, they don't want to be shown, what you're doing. But we are, again, if you we treat our department as solution providers. And any questions you have, you're always more than happy to answer, but ask the question, right? So the relationships are also goes a long way there, right? There's many, we try not to be order takers, we try to be collaborators that meet frequently, discuss. These are shared objectives, right? Our goal as an organization is to get here. All of us need to be rowing in the same way.
It's an area that's always facing change and always evolving, right? Internally, externally. And I think whenever I think of the word innovation, the first department that comes to mind is either technology or business intelligence or data. How do you, I guess, try and stay ahead of the curve. Think about innovation. I know so many incredible technology executives that are, the first to have done something, and there's something cool and something exciting about being the first to achieve something new in an industry and being the first to innovate. How do you kind of measure and filter between the two of ensuring that we're doing what we can today to drive the best business decisions and to ensure that everyone is benefiting from this amazing department that you've built, but also keeping one eye on the future and how we're going to continue to evolve and grow as a business? There's always the conversation around not being left behind when it comes to technology and letting your competitors have an advantage. How do you kind of manage that, I guess, internal battle of looking at the here and today, but also planning for the tomorrow and future?
Yeah, so really I'm successful if everyone else is successful, right? If, for example, if our objective is, I don't know, the CRM data, if the close rates go up, right? So that's how I look at it. If I'm doing everything else and it doesn't really impact the business, then that's really probably not the best approach of my time either. But it's also important to experiment and do things that maybe not going to respond right now and do that. And we're good at that. It's part of sort of our DNA. Experiment and see what happens. Of course, we try to be, calculated and just not take crazy risks, but we know sometimes things can fail. For me, networking, how we think about that is also understanding what everyone else is doing, but looking outside the sports industry. And here where I am is a huge part of that, is the technology ecosystem here, the people you run into here and the discussions you're having, not in sports, but somebody is doing something crazy in marketing. Let's see what they're doing, right? So that's a big part of that. And then collaborating with our partners. We have a lot of technology partners, understanding what they're doing outside of the sports industry and in general where they are going. We can tap into that. Like for AI, for example, which of course there can't be a podcast if we don't talk about AI right now. Everybody's doing things and it's overwhelming. It's also can be security risk associated with and all of those things. What I'm looking for is what are the things we have already, what are the partners doing in that space that I can just add to something that I have and test something that links with our CRM system and this and that and go from there, right? So it's because otherwise I probably need to hire 5 people to just focus on AI, right? It's just also not reasonable. And it can be overwhelming. And sometimes, for me, because I'm like, oh my God, we need to do this, we need to do that, and I get very excited about it, you also got to manage your own expectation of not get disappointed, because thankfully I'm very realistic. Knowing that these are the things I can do is important, and focusing on those. But yeah, once in a while, you get a little bit like, oh, I really want to do that and I can't. And you try, like there was this project I wanted to do 2 years ago, not the right time. I was disappointed. I'm kicking it off next week, right? So because it's more than me, it's all the other people that are working with it. And I can't like shove things, by force into people. You just gotta, into what their objectives are. It has to work for everyone. And sometimes it happens. Somebody wants something and we're like, no, we can't do that right now for these reasons. Let's look at it next year.
There's something really beautiful that I find about the sports industry when it comes to collaboration, team to team. Now, obviously, the US sporting structure and organization is conducted very differently to what I'm used to growing up in the UK and in Europe. But the idea of having, almost like a center of excellence team or a, Teambo in the NBA, and having this group of people that connect every now and then, that share best practice, because at the end of the day, you're competing maybe on the ice or on the court or on the field, but when it comes to the business side of things, you're not necessarily competing with each other in the exact same way. And I find that a really, really good way of not just sharing best practices and, keeping everyone up to date with where the industry's headed, but also using those opportunities almost as like times to voice ideas and voice, hey, we're thinking about this. What do you guys think? Have you guys come across this? I can imagine, having that situation, that organization is super supportive, especially when it comes to something like BI and tech.
Very much so. It's a huge support system. It's the network by itself. I mean, I got in very early, and some of my counterparts, we were all together, are now in similar roles. Some have moved outside of the industry, but people have also moved around. And now we get on the calls, and now there are 200-300 BI people, which is blows my mind, right? It was 5 of us. We used to go in conferences and go sit in the corner, have beers together and complain, right? So that by itself is absolutely fantastic to see. That also means there are people who are trying new things, they're trying things you already done. But if there's something coming up, we also share of, hey, even let's say it's a vendor, have you worked with this person? What do you think? Oh, these are the pros, these are the cons, problems that comes up. Even there are times that, I don't know, some, and that goes both on technology side and the BI side. Somebody, understands something is happening and gives everybody else the heads up of like, hey, I just ran into, I don't know, like let's say a spam situation or something. So
Yeah.
it is a huge support network. And I really appreciate it because it definitely has helped me be successful. And hopefully I have done that to other people. A good example of it is when I took over the IT department here, right? I have, of course, always worked with IT, but I don't have the traditional IT background. And several people reached out. It was like, hey, if you need anything, let me know. And there were a couple of cases that I was, and I'm not, I'm okay being like, hey, I don't know this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
And that has been very helpful. Or, you go from one system to another,
Yeah.
right? Okay, you did this. What was the pitfalls? How did you deal with this issue? So if I've experienced something, I can share my experience and hopefully vice versa. And it just helps us all get better. And yeah, we don't compete. Of course, like during playoffs, we might be doing some, good ribbing and trash. And that's also fun part of it. But we all want to get better. And as an industry and as a league, especially, it's always helpful.
And that's only going to help the general evolve in the evolution, I should say, of BI, of technology, of the industry, right? If everyone's learning from each other and almost tackling it as a team rather than everyone just trying to figure it out for themselves, it's only going to, I'd be very surprised if there wasn't that structure in place, 10, 15 years ago, whether BI and tech would be what it is today, because you just don't have the sharing of best practices, the challenges, the hurdles, and everything that comes with that.
Yeah.
Now, that's been incredibly insightful. I've come away from this learning quite a few things. Last question for you. We have a lot of listeners of the podcast that are kind of just exploring careers in sports. Some earlier on in their careers, some a little later on looking to make a bit of a transition. What advice would you give to any of those people that are looking to pursue not only a career in sports, but when taking into account business analytics, data, and technology?
I would say, everybody's journey is different completely, right? And we're seeing that more and more. One of the things I always ask people when they say they want to work in the sports industry, if they're not already in the sports industry, or if you're having an intro, I always ask them why. Why the sports industry? So I think knowing that is important. And just being a fan or an athlete in that space is not good enough at all, in my opinion, at all. Because if you're hiring a BI analyst, the fact that you play hockey doesn't really make a difference on your day-to-day. Of course, there's the soft skills, all of that. I'm not discounting those. But I think knowing why you want to get into sports industry is important, and then honing your skills. Of course, that's, being an athlete or being a fan adds a little bit of maybe cherry on the top that is important. But if you want to be an analyst, if you want to be a technology, IT person, salesperson, whatever it is, you have to have the skills that shows that. And then some of what I mentioned that has helped my success is the network, right? There are people that can support you if you're in the sports industry or whatever, even if you're not in the industry, support your journey, help you solve your problems, and at least provide you with a little bit of feedback. And then the continuous learning part, right? What are you reading? What is happening in the sports industry? What is happening outside of the industry in your space? Just that continuous learning is hugely important, not only in technology and BI. If you're not doing it, you're probably obsolete in 6 months, frankly, because things are changing so quickly. That is important. And I think depending on where you're in your career, having a mentor is really important. And then if you're more senior, looking into executive coach is also really important. Having people you have your friends, you have your, family. You want somebody who gives you direct feedback that is the right feedback based on it could be that you're doing something wrong, or these are the areas you need to improve. Sort of unbiased feedback that is going to be hugely important for you. And then do your research, right? If you want to work for this organization, What is their culture? Do their values match your values? And you never want to fake it, but you want to make sure you're finding the right space for yourself, because otherwise, you know, you're probably not going to last. You want this right space for yourself and where you are, and you want to make sure you're part of, you know, if you get into the sports industry, what we do has a lot of great parts to it. What we do again in the community, the impact of the brands and all of that. So just do your research and know what you're looking for, instead of just, I want to work in hockey. Like, okay, what is it that is there in details?
Yeah, hone in on it. Love it. Neda, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Really appreciate your perspective, time and attention. I'm sure a lot of people can take a lot from today's session. For anyone who is interested, Neda's a very open book, and she'll be tagged in the LinkedIn post here, and feel free to reach out if you're exploring opportunities and the San Jose Sharks is a potential destination for you. I'm sure she's open to having a conversation. But Neda, just want to say thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys get on this upcoming season.
Thank you. It was very enjoyable talking to you. Thank you for making it easy. It was a great discussion, and honestly more like a chat.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next week.